Draft Podcast. I'm your host, Seth Cox. With me, as always, my co-host, Justin Higdon. Justin, how are you?
I'm doing great as always, just getting myself mentally prepared for another week of Brian Hoyer as the starting quarterback of my Cleveland Browns.
Manziel will be there next year. Don't worry.
He
And,
might be
and
there next week.
and of course, the biggest Packers fan I know. No, I'm just kidding. The least positive Packers fan I know, Justice Mosqueda. What's up, Justice?
Not much. Just contemplating how bad I want to lose this NFC Championship game against Seattle. I think we're better than everyone else in the NFC. But, man, Seattle, the Giants, and San Francisco, if we ever play, like, an important game, they just destroy us every single time.
Yeah. I mean, it could be worse. Could have been 9-1, and now you're 9-3, and there's legitimate questions
Free Logan.
whether you're going to win another game this year. But we're here to, of course, talk about the 2015 NFL Draft as we do every week. And this week's going to be a little bit different. The next probably 3 or 4 weeks is going to be more of about previews, what prospects we'll be watching. Obviously, this weekend in the conference championship game, and then going forward, the bowl games and the impact that those games, even though they're a singular game, can have on a prospect and kind of your evaluation of a prospect, especially in big game scenarios. And I'm going to start with Justice tonight, and we're going to start at his home in Oregon. You have Marcus Mariota, who's, for some reason, Rich Rodriguez is kind of the kryptonite to what the Oregon Ducks do in general, not just Mariota, but just the Ducks in general. How important is it for Mariota to play well in this game? Kind of that question that we joked about last week about his, not being tough enough, not being a leader type thing. How much of that is, can you tell from this game in a single game like this, although it is a huge game?
Well, I don't know how much it truly is going to matter that much. I mean, it's another data point on his career. But if he loses, back to back to back to Arizona in his, career, that's going to be a huge narrative. You know what I mean? We're going to end up being, all right, Jameis has made some mistakes, but he knows how to win. He's pulled off, 28 straight now. And if Mariota loses to the same team 3 times in a row, I mean, I could almost see people spinning it as, like, Peyton Manning's Tennessee. And you're right. I mean, Arizona's just kind of the kryptonite for this damn Oregon team. I mean, that 3-3-5 stack just destroys them, which is why I don't want TCU to move up to that number 3 slot. I'd rather face Florida State as a Ducks fan than TCU, because TCU has that defense that can just shut down this entire team. We'll see how that turns out. Guys like Scooby Wright, he can't declare this year. He'll declare next year. But he's really good. Like, he's actually, like, really talented. He might be a first-round off-the-ball linebacker. You have Joe Walker in Oregon, who I think is a redshirt sophomore. I think he can declare because he spent a redshirt year after transferring from junior college. But I highly doubt that'll happen. Oregon's got some guys on the defensive line. I think, Eric Armstead is gone. That's kind of been out this whole year. He took out that $5 million insurance policy the same way, Marcus Mariota did. His brother got hurt in the CFL. His brother got hurt at USC, had to go to the CFL, then ended up in New England and got hurt again. So he firsthand saw a career of a young, talented player go downhill. So I think he's going to, run to money as soon as he possibly can. And I don't fault him for it at all. I think DeForest Buckner's probably going to be gone too. Watching Ifo Ekpeulum go against these cornerbacks again is going to be interesting. Or these receivers again is going to be interesting because Arizona legitimately has 3 receivers who could probably make it in the NFL, which is, it's saying something. And some of these teams will just target the hell out of Ifo in the red zone just because of his size. Troy Hill, who plays field corner for Oregon, he's had a great year. He might be that fringe draftable type of guy. I definitely think he'll end up in a camp. Eric Dargan ended up being, Oregon's defensive MVP of the season. He's playing safety. He's a senior. He's doing really good. You have Jake Fisher at left tackle. Grosstu's still hurt. there's a lot of talent on both sides of the ball here. I mean, Arizona has running backs that are just ripping off gains. I mean, it's hard to tell behind that Rich Rodriguez offense. But even they have a tackle, Backus. There's just talent scattered all over this field. There's a reason why these two teams are top 7.
You look at U of A's side, and you have a guy like Tremaine Bondurant, Austin Hill, as you talked about. You see they have a little bit of talent on the offensive line. A couple of the players' names are escaping me right now, but is it a bigger deal for U of A to play well in this game than Oregon in terms of just kind of getting their name out there draft-wise, or is it a big deal to see Mariota show up in a big game, Justin, in this instance?
I think both, because of what Justice said about the narrative. It's definitely going to be, if I can just imagine, if Mariota cannot beat and loses to Arizona for the 3rd time in a row, that's just going to follow him all the way through. It'll be the thing people who support him defend him against. It'll be the thing his detractors point to. But for Arizona, it's a really great opportunity for players on that team to make names for themselves. And that's a team, I've seen them quite a few times this year, but I'm not sure that they're really in the national spotlight for as good of a team as they are. And you guys mentioned Mickey Backus. He's got a Shrine Game invite, I think. He's their left tackle. I don't think he's a great prospect, but I think he's probably draftable. He has this kind of ups and downs. He sometimes looks back to the ball too soon when instead of sustaining his blocks, but that's something that I watched last week closely, and he did a pretty good job against Arizona State. You mentioned Bondurant, and all three safeties last week. Jared Tevis, who's a former walk-on, also played well last week, as did Jordan Grandin, who's their free safety. So they have 3 safeties who all played really well last week. They have a chance to improve their stock. I mean, Justice mentioned Scooby Wright, who's probably their best player. He's got a good chance to go into next year as a really hot name. And then the receivers, I think Austin Hill, we've talked about him on the show before. He hasn't really seemed healthy all year. Looked a little bit sharper, a little bit quicker last week to me. So he's a receiver, big, strong receiver that came into the year as a hype name. And they also have Caleb Jones, who's a transfer from Texas. He's a redshirt sophomore. He's draft eligible, and he's really been their best receiver this year. So they've got a lot of talent and guys that can really make a name for themselves. If they're able to beat Oregon again, those names will get hotter, even if they play a really close game Friday night. It's a good chance for this team.
Is this a good redemption chance for Tony Washington and the bow at midfield, Justice?
Oh my God, yeah. Yeah, that would be really awesome if he could do something. Yeah, I miss Tony Washington when I was rattling off all these Oregon prospects.
There's just so many prospects. I mean, there's legitimately probably, 8 to 10 Oregon players that can be drafted this year. I mean, you probably would have been at the 10 spot if not for the injuries with, Fisher, Grassu, those guys. I mean, they're
or
probably
even Johnstone. I mean, remember Johnstone was supposed to be their left tackle, and he was supposed to be the really highly touted guy. And that's why I wrote that piece for Draft Breakdown in the preseason about Jake Fisher. Because I was like, there's a really good left tackle, but, this guy out here, he's really athletic. He could probably play left tackle at the next level. And then he ended up sliding out before he got hurt and then came back in.
And they're missing Braylon Addison, who's been out all year, and they're missing Pharaoh Brown now. So there's 2 other draftable guys that won't be playing.
Yeah. So in the same kind of vein, Justin, Ohio State, you're an Ohio State fan. Michael Bennett, one of the bigger names. Well, when you look at Melvin Gordon, though, and we talk about, we've talked about the running backs, I think, 2 or 3 times now, and what Melvin Gordon can show in this game against an Ohio State defense that has been a little bit susceptible to the run. Does he need to have a big day? Obviously for Wisconsin to win, he probably needs to have a big day. But just in terms of what you want to see as an evaluation tool, what do you want to see from him against this Ohio State defense?
I think I've seen enough of Melvin Gordon to really know what I think about him, and I think he's a great college running back. I don't like him as much as some other guys do. We've talked about that. I wouldn't take him as my top back. One thing that he's going to have to do, and that other running backs have had success against Ohio State, is he's got to get to the second level. Then he can make his moves. If he does that, he's going to cause a lot of damage because they've had some trouble. They've got some youth at the linebacker position. Some of their secondary guys haven't been tackling great. But if he does some of these reverse field, stop his feet behind the line of scrimmage type of things, that's where Ohio State can kind of eat him up. They've got Bosa, of course, Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year. He's not draft eligible, but he will be next year. Bennett's been playing really well down the stretch, and he kind of, when he's not making plays himself, he's creating room for other guys to make plays. And then they've got a really underrated defensive end who splits time, and that's senior Steve Miller. He's a really strong run defending defensive end. So those guys, it's more about how they play, because Gordon's gonna do his damage. I mean, he's on pace to rush for over 2,500 yards. He could break, and I say break in quotes because they didn't count the bowl games back then, but he could break Barry Sanders' single season record this year. So I think a lot of people's minds are made up about Gordon. He'd have to really lay an egg to drop, but it's about that Ohio State defense and what some of those guys can do against a guy who's been tearing up almost every defense he's faced. And can they rise to the occasion, especially considering that they're probably going to have to hold Wisconsin to fewer points than what we've seen them do throughout this year.
When you look at the Wisconsin team, Justice, probably not a ton of pro prospects. A couple offensive linemen, the usual kind of interior guys on the defensive side of the ball. Is there one name outside of Gordon that you'll be watching from the Wisconsin side of things?
Oh man, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. It's really just Melvin Gordon. I mean, that's the guy everyone's watching. I think they had a young guy on the defensive line who I don't think is draft eligible, but I had him written down from last season. I mean, overall, it's really the Melgore team, right? Like, there's really not anything else to watch. I mean, he's almost single-handedly taking that offense. I mean, that's nothing new, right? They have giant bodies on the offensive line that intrigue you because they're giant, and then they just have a stable of running backs that they just pound. And that's pretty much what Wisconsin football has been for the past, 2 decades.
Going to the ACC championship game, obviously Jameis Winston will be the focus. How important is it for him to put a whole game together as opposed to this first quarter or first 2 quarters of garbage before he turns it on and looks like that first round prospect that a lot of people are touting him to be, Justice?
Man, I think it's really important because all eyes are going to be on this game, and if he just keeps skating by every single one of these games before he breaks it to the playoffs, that's just going to be an issue. I've said this over and over again about his underneath coverage. I mean, you could see it from the first quarter of the Oklahoma State game this season, where just the guys just realized, Ogba from Oklahoma State just realized, oh, okay, like he has no idea how to move his eyes. Like, we're just going to attack this. And then, they had, they played off coverage with their corners and just had them, just break right to the receiver almost instantly. And they almost got a pick six at, like, the goal line. So I think that's going to be huge, especially against this Georgia Tech team. Because, everyone says it, right, that, like, Georgia Tech is, a team that's really hard to scheme for. But the thing about Georgia Tech is you don't really figure out how to play Georgia Tech halfway through a game, right? Like, you either got it or you don't got it. It's not like it's a super complex system or something. It's pretty evident early on if Georgia Tech's going to be able to beat you or not.
Justin, for you, looking at this Georgia Tech team, a guy that was getting a little bit of buzz, especially within the draft community, tore an ACL this week. the first name's escaping me. I know the last name's Smelter. Um, outside of him, who are some prospects that you could like on this Georgia Tech team, and who could kind of open some eyes this week?
Well, with DeAndre Smelter being out, their next best receiver is Darren Waller, and he was probably the guy that people coming into the season were looking at as far as who would be the next Georgia Tech receiver. I think Smelter was kind of an unknown guy because he had played baseball going in, but beyond that, it's just it's a real shame that Smelter isn't going to be able to play because he was getting a lot of hype lately, in almost into the hot take territory of hype. Because what you see with Georgia Tech receivers is a lot of curls, a lot of go routes, and really not a whole lot else. But Smelter have really good hands. It's a shame. It's a really, real sad when a guy tears his ACL this late in the game because it's going to affect where he gets drafted. So can Waller step into that role? I haven't really seen much of him. I know he's a big guy, 6'3", 6'4", about 225. He's going to be the guy that they're gonna have to stop. And I know Waller has a Shrine Game invite, I think. Either that or NFLPA. I can't remember for sure. Another guy that they have is a linebacker, Quayshawn Neely. He's probably one of their leaders on the defense. Beyond that, I don't really know a lot about Georgia Tech, and that's a really tough team as a draft analyst. It's a tough team to watch because they do something so differently than what you see in the NFL. So much of it's just projecting. So really, it's about this Florida State team more than anything because this could be a mass exodus of underclassmen, and really it's a team that's underachieved. So if Georgia Tech goes out there and beats Florida State, all hell's breaking loose.
Well, another thing that you were saying, so how it makes it hard, to project from that system. One thing that does help you, I've said this about ACC prospects for a while, is, when they have a game against Georgia Tech, watch the game against Georgia Tech, because usually those guys are playing way differently than they would have before, and it kind of gives you a better feel. Like Fuller last year, right? Or was it Fuller or Exum? One of them played like inside linebacker last season, right? Against Georgia Tech.
I thought it was Exum.
Yeah, it must have been Exum. I thought Fuller, and then I was like, wait, no, he didn't drop from safety. Yeah, it must have been Exum. So watching these Florida State guys play this run-heavy, option offense is going to be interesting, especially with Eddie Goldman. Did you guys see wow, I butchered that. Monday Morning Quarterback dropped their first big board of the season, and they had like Eddie Goldman at like number 5 or number 6 or something. So watching a run stout guy like him going against that team is going to be big. I believe Mario Edwards Jr. was like in their top 10 too.
Yeah, it'll be interesting watching both of those guys because I've only really broken down Goldman against Notre Dame, but he's a guy that gets a ton of push right at the line of scrimmage. I'm not sure how quick he is, though, laterally, because he's such a big guy. And Edwards has come in and really had a disappointing year, especially compared to he had a really strong bowl game last year, and it looked like something he could really build on. So, these guys could either look really, really terrible against a Georgia Tech team, or like you said, if they go out there and ball, then it could justify those kind of grades for them.
Right, and the other thing about Mario Edwards Jr. too is, he's essentially playing 43 defensive end. He's standing up sometimes. He's 300 plus pounds. That's not what he's going to do at the next level. So, this Georgia Tech game might be the best game to evaluate him on. I'm looking at the big board right now. They have Mario Edwards at 11, so he wasn't top 10. But they had Eddie Goldman at 5, right between Leonard Williams and Jameis Winston. So, wow. That's huge. Monday Morning Quarterback saying, how much they think about Golden. I like him. I definitely think he's a tier below Leonard Williams, though. But I definitely think he's the second best pure defensive lineman in this draft class.
When you look at Cam Irving and the switch over to center, especially in what is kind of becoming a fairly weak center class with the injuries, and I think I can't remember the kid's name from Auburn that we talked about a couple of weeks ago was the top guy, and then he kind of got bullied in a couple of games. Texas A&M and Alabama are the first ones that come to mind. Could Irving kind of fall into a day two pick as a center after probably falling out of day two as a left tackle, Justin?
Yeah, I think he could. I've already seen people kind of start to push him into that top center spot, and it really never hurts. Even as poorly as he played at left tackle earlier in the year, it doesn't hurt to show that you can start for a big program at different spots along the line. Versatility is important. A lot of NFL teams, the openings that come available, you never really know. You look at a team like the Cleveland Browns when they have an injury to Alex Mack, and the first thing they try to do is move John Greco from right guard to center. So anytime that you have that versatility, I don't think it can hurt you as an offensive lineman as far as a draft prospect, especially because Irving's played better since he's moved and things have kind of improved. I don't know. Day two, yeah, I could see him going on day two because you just never know with these lines and with a class like this where there's not a ton of inspiring quarterback play. Some of these other positions are kind of top heavy, and teams are going to need linemen. Teams are always looking to beef up the trenches, and Irving's a pretty good athlete still, despite his struggles earlier in the year.
Yeah, one thing with Irvin that I'd like to say is Dave T. Thomas, who he writes for Scout.com, and he works with teams. He wrote a draft piece a couple weeks ago, and he was still saying, even though he flipped to center, he still views Irving as like a second-round pick. And I was like, oh man. I mean, I don't know how much weight I'm putting into Vic Beasley just abusing him with speed. Because Vic Beasley definitely has, that rare, speed. I mean, he's in the top echelon of even NFL players once he gets there. That's definitely his go-to trait. But, it's hard for me to think that teams are still considering Cam Irving as a tackle. You know what I mean? He just struggles so much with speed. I know we've talked a little bit about like Brandon Scherf struggling with speed and things like that. But I mean, Irvin just gets abused, and if you have a counter move, I mean, you could almost beat him down all day. Him moving to center definitely helped him. At least in my opinion. I mean, he's looked definitely a lot better there. And it looks like the young guy that they got at Florida State is going to be really good. I mean, I believe he's a true freshman too. And I mean, he just looks great already. He and then the guy from Alabama. They definitely look really impressive, and they're guys to watch for like drafted from like 2 years from now.
Yeah.
Yeah. 2017.
Just wait till that 2017 class.
Yeah, that's right. To finish up kind of the Florida State talk, Nick O'Leary, Troy O'Leary, I don't know where that came from. Nick O'Leary and Rashad Green. Where do they kind of fall in this class of tight ends that isn't really that great and wide receivers that look like it's going to be pretty talented and deep again, at least for you, Justice, to start with?
I don't really think O'Leary is really anything special. I know a lot of people liked him. I kind of, it's hard to tell with all this preseason stuff, right? He was definitely a guy whose name I jotted down. And I could have, he could have risen to, being top tight end. But the more I watch him, the less I like about him. I mean, he just kind of looks really average out there. Rashad Green, I actually really like. I mean, he's almost like a Greg Jennings type. I don't think he's gonna be like, he's not gonna be stellar. But he's gonna be good enough to be a number one, and he's gonna be, if you have him as like a number two or number three, you're gonna be really, really, really lucky to have him. Going back to that big board, they have Monday Morning Quarterback has him ranked 13th overall, Rashad Green, over guys like Andres Pete, Kevin White, Malcolm Brown, Melvin Gordon, Vic Beasley, Dante Fowler, Jalen Collins. So that's something to keep in mind too.
I'm always interested in these big boards, especially.
This whole big board is our hot take.
Oh my God!
This is the hot takes for
But I mean, I'm always interested when these guys come out with big boards because I wonder. And you may know a little more than I do, Justice and Justin, but how much of it is what they're hearing over what they actually believe in your mind, Justin?
At this point, I think it's just, I don't want to sound like a jerk about this, but at this point, it's just kind of who you see and what you like. I don't think there's a lot to be heard from this early in the game. With all due respect, Rashad Green is a very good college player, and like Justice said, if you have him as a 2 or a 3, I view him as a slot guy. I can't take a guy that weighs 175, 180 pounds, 13th overall any year, in the last 30 years, because it's just not the type of player that you draft this high. This was the argument that I had about Tavon Austin. Green's taller, he's thin, he's a really great route runner. He's got great hands, but both these guys, Green and O'Leary, they're just kind of undersized guys for their positions. What they do in the college level is going to be different than what they do. I don't see either one of them as being a number one guy at their position as far as on a team, let alone in a class. So this big board, I think as you get toward April, then a guy like Mayock, Kuiper, maybe even I don't think Pauline lets it affect his board as much, but those guys, Mayock and Kuiper, McShay, I think it really starts to become a lot about what they hear. But right now at Monday Morning Quarterback, and I'm not sure who crafted that big board, but I think it's just like, who have you seen a lot of? Who do you like? If I tried to build a big board right now, it'd probably look kind of hot takey too.
It was Andy Staples that built it. At least the one I'm looking at. Is that the one you're looking at, Justice?
Yeah, it's Andy Staples.
Okay.
And he's a college football guy primarily, so
right.
It's just that's interesting.
Oakman's at 37.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, Eddie Goldman, and not to kind of hang out on this topic because we still got the SEC championship game to talk about, but Eddie Goldman, does everybody remember last year who was the big guy from Florida State? The defensive tackle. It's slipping my mind now.
Jernigan.
Yeah, Timmy Jernigan. Yep.
Remember, he was a top 10 on almost all boards in November.
Oh yeah. No.
I was off that Jernigan board real fast.
Yeah, but I mean, just in general, like you watch a lot of them, and you see a lot of them, and you're going to see these names a lot, and then all of a sudden these names are going to go away. And this is kind of what we talked about in the email I sent you about. At this point, you've got kind of your guys that you know. Now you're waiting. And now you're waiting to see who's going to declare, because that's going to really shake up everything that you've done so far. Because I mean, I don't think he is, but what happens if Benardrick McKinney goes back to Mississippi State? I mean, Justice is going to cry into his pillow for weeks. I mean, it's just one of those things, and. Yeah, the hot take is the fact that he has Dak Prescott at 27. So
has he? Has he watched Mississippi State the last 6 or 7 games? Because there's a question in my mind if Dak Prescott is even a quarterback at the NFL level.
Yeah, it's really hard to go about. It wasn't Monday Morning Quarterback, but I know Sports Illustrated ran draft pieces last year, and I think Aaron Murray at one point was number 10 on their board, and they would update it week to week. Outside of the Aaron Murray thing, which seemed really 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 weird, most of it looked fine, right? There's just a couple guys kind of like for the most part this big board that Andy Staples made, nothing's really that shocking. I mean, there's a couple parts that make you go, oh, okay, but usually you can see where it's coming from. That was almost the same thing last year with the SI one, except for Aaron Murray just randomly would be like number 11 on the board for some reason. Quarterbacks is just weird because if one team likes them, I mean, we would have made fun of people who would have had EJ Manuel as a top 16 guy on their board, right? Like we would have just chastised the hell out of him, and then it happens. So it's just kind of weird.
Going to the SEC championship game, is this a quote-unquote down year for Alabama in terms of prospects, Justice? Or because outside of Landon Collins, you're not seeing a ton of first-round names? Or is it just kind of the fact that maybe the lack of impact that Alabama players are having in the NFL has kind of woken everybody up?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both of them. I mean, Alabama guys, even like Rolando McClain. I mean, you see these guys that finally start panning out for Bama, and they had to take like 2 years off to like let their body heal from the brutal punishment that they put through. They're just throwing sledgehammers on them at Alabama. I think a lot of it is that the guys who are talented for Alabama are young because so many have left early. I mean, so before last season, I believe the only player who there was the only position that had ever left a Nick Saban coached team, which didn't end up being a first round pick, declaring early, was a running back. Last year they had guys like Adrian Hubbard who ended up declaring and going undrafted. So it's just a little bit of change. I mean, a lot of guys from Bama last year, got drafted, right? I don't know what the number is off the top of my head, but just thinking of all the talents that they had to replace, it makes sense. I mean, they have a dude who's playing left tackle right now that teams would probably think about taking in the top 10. The problem is he can't declare for another 2 years. Everyone says that the best tight end in the country is playing for him right now. The problem is they just don't throw him the ball. They have a stable of running backs, and everyone always loves the running back who's right behind the starter, and it will forever always be that. But, I mean, they had to replace guys like C.J. Mosley, Clinton Dix, Cyrus Kouandjio, just top talented guys, their quarterback, everything. So I think the talent is there at Bama. I just think it's too young to be, in full fruition at this point.
TJ Yeldon, I think, and I made this comment during the game last week, I think his freshman year, when he ran all over a lot of teams, especially LSU late, everybody kind of got on that next Adrian Peterson bandwagon before everybody disliked Adrian Peterson for what he does off the field. When you look at that, and then I think last year they overcorrected, and it was like, oh, he's trash, he can't do anything. Kind of this year, I think he's kind of settled in to what he is, which is a good running back, kind of a power guy between the tackles. Is that kind of what happens because the internet and the draft community kind of overshot on what he was, and then to get him back down to what he actually is, they had to knock him down, Justin? Or was he that bad last year to you?
No, I didn't think he was that bad at all. I think it is some overcorrection because, and he's kind of guilty of the sins of those who came before him. And by that, I'm talking about Trent Richardson, Mark Ingram had disappointment. Here's Mark Ingram finally breaking out in this free agent year after being a first-round pick. Trent Richardson doesn't look like he can ever break out. He might play well this weekend, but that's a different story. But I don't think Yeldon is that bad. And one thing I actually think he has become so he was so overrated that he became underrated. And now I think he's a good back. He's a big guy. He's got quick feet for a big guy. He's got good pass catching abilities, real underrated receiver, and they don't throw to him a ton, but he does have 45, 46 catches in his career. And the one thing that I kind of like that we've seen this year is he's not carrying a ton of times, like 20 times per game. You look at his game log, and most of his games are under 20 carries a game. And then last week when they needed him more than ever, he came through with a huge game against Auburn. So I actually like TJ Yeldon, and I think he's probably, if he declares, which I think everyone thinks is a foregone conclusion, but if he comes out, I think he could be a top 5, top 6 back in this class, depending on what teams are looking for. He's still, to me, I still think he's a better prospect coming out than I thought Eddie Lacy was at that time.
Justice, when you look at this Mizzou team and the pass rushing that they have, how important is it for, because you made the comment about Cam Robinson that he might be the best prospect in college right now. How important is it for Shane Ray and Marcus Golden to have a good day?
Super important. I mean, I definitely think, we've talked about this. I definitely think Ray is a step ahead of Golden. And I think Ray is almost, we were talking earlier about these names that you just see all the time, and then you start seeing them like fade away. I think Ray might be that guy. I mean, I truly cannot co-sign him being a top 5 pick. I think he's going to be, late first rounder type. And I've seen people, mock him first overall and things like that, which I think is just crazy. At least, to me, what I value in pass rushers. Golden is pretty solid. He's more, both of these guys are kind of short area burst guys. Shane Ray has pistons for legs, but he's got such a wide base. He almost looks like a crab on caffeine, like just going ham, just super fast, like rapid fire wide base. So he doesn't get going very often. Like his closing speed is pretty poor. I think it was, I want to say it was against like Akron or it was against Central Florida when they had a punt and the snap went over the head of the punter. And Shane Ray chased the guy, and it took him like 15 minutes to get to the punter, and the punter ended up getting the punt off. And Ray was completely free. Is that the number 1 pick that you guys are talking about as an edge rusher? An undersized edge rusher. This guy's not 250 pounds yet, and he can't close on a punter. When the snap goes over his head to block this punt, completely free. But watching him battle against that Bama offensive line is going to be fun because even there's the freshman, and then there's also Kawanjo. And Kawanjo's really good, even though he's playing guard. And I believe the right tackle is a guard prospect. What I was told, at least, is a guard prospect, and then the other guard is an NFL prospect too. So just seeing them all go against each other, because Golden will play inside, and Ray will play inside a little bit, and I actually think that helps Ray better. Ray's whole thing is he's really good at quickness. I think the closer to the ball, the better he's going to be, which is really odd to say since he's a sub 250-pound player. But I just think that quickness near the line, near the interior of the line of scrimmage is going to be something where he could just shoot a gap, and if your center's not on his game, this dude's going to slide right past him. The other guy that I'd say that's worth watching on this Missouri team is Mitch Morse. He's a left tackle, but he's probably more of a right tackle prospect at the next level. He might be better than Justin Britt, and Justin Britt was a 2nd-round pick for some reason. Still can't figure that one out. But Justin Britt was a 2nd-round pick, and Mitch Morse might be better than him. So there's always that.
Amari Cooper.
Who?
Amari Cooper. We've had this discussion. Best player in the, best wide receiver in the draft, not the best wide receiver in the draft. No matter your opinion of that, is this his last, well, I know not his last game, but is this one of the last times Alabama fans will see him suit up? And how, can he do anything else at this point, or is he basically, is he this year's Sammy Watkins, Justin?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think he's going to go 4th overall, because I think you're seeing, you probably could talk to the Bills front office in private, and they might admit that they might have spent too much to go get Sammy Watkins. For all the great flashes that we've seen in Sammy Watkins, it's tough for a guy that's 6 feet tall to really transform and change in NFL games, and we're seeing all these taller, bigger, taller guys having dominant rookie seasons. So, but Cooper, as far as what he can do, he doesn't have anything left to prove at the college level, in my opinion. Some people are going to get on him about some drops, and I think it's more of a concentration thing. It's not that he has poor hands. We've also seen him make fantastic catches. I've heard criticism of him not high pointing the ball well, but it's one of those things. What games have you seen? What clips have you seen? Because there's probably times where he has. I know there's times that he has high pointed the ball and gotten up there and looked great. I don't know. You never really know how these guys are going to test. Coming out of Alabama, they're always kind of beat up. He was rumored to have 4.3 speed last spring, so take that with a grain of salt from those junior pro days, but he's probably still going to run the 4.4s, mid 4.4s, and he's just ultra productive. For a guy he's not going to have the ideal measurables, he's going to have pretty good athletic testing, and he's going to have ultra production. So he's not going to be the fantasy guys aren't going to love him, but the draft guys are going to have a hard time putting other players ahead of him. But as you guys know, and I've stuck with this all year, and I know he slumped a little bit, but I'd still take Kevin White over Amari Cooper.
And, the fact that A.J. McCarron is still on an NFL roster when he couldn't get Amari Cooper the ball his senior year, I don't know, Bengals. I don't know, Cincinnati. We might need to move past that one quicker than you guys expected. Like, it's crazy. Like, I remember watching that Texas A&M game from, I believe it must have been Amari Cooper's freshman year, where he was just torching defensive backs, and just McCarron just couldn't get him the ball. I mean, if McCarron had that ball right, Amari could have had like 3 more touchdowns that game. I mean, he was just destroying guys, and McCarron just couldn't get it to him. It was amazing. I was just like, crap. Like that's when everyone was like, I think for like 2 months, anytime anyone said that McCarron was a first-round pick, I would just fire off the draft breakdown link to that game. I just fire it up and just be like, tell me where you think this first-round pick is that can't throw a deep ball to a wide-open receiver streaking downfield.
When you look at the conference championship games in general, and then the bowl games, how much in a percentage-wise would you say is that part of your process, Justin?
Maybe slightly more than any other game because it's just one game, and when it comes down to it, it's going to be you'll see SEC teams or maybe even a Big Ten team or someone like that play a team that's not as good or not as strong as an opponent as some of their regular season foes. Pac-12 has been fantastic in conference, so some of those teams that end up at a lesser bowl game might end up playing a lesser opponent than what they play their conference schedule. So if it's a real marquee matchup, maybe slightly more than a regular game, but I don't think you want to put too much stock into it. It's something, I'm not sure you want to put too much more stock into it. It's something you definitely want to look. It'll probably impact players like the quarterbacks more than anything else, and then, of course, it's going to impact the general fans more so than the real nitty-gritty draft guys, because they might not have seen quite as many games, and that's easy to understand, because if a guy goes out there, I think of Geno Smith at the Pinstripe Bowl a couple years ago, and they were playing in the snow, and he really just had a poor game, probably his worst game of the year, and might have been kind of prophetic, but looking back, but I remember people high on Geno Smith, and I raising my hand here, I was one of them, kind of had to defend him against that game, and that kind of thing goes on. But as far as your evaluation process, I think it depends on the matchup, and then you just kind of have to weigh it accordingly. But I wouldn't weigh it too. If we're talking Alabama-Auburn, and then Auburn ends up going to a bowl playing, say, Iowa, then I'll probably weigh that Iron Bowl over any bowl game.
No, don't make fun of Iowa. Um,
One thing that I think is, the projection into the next season. I think these Bulls weigh a lot on the media side, more than they should. I mean, Taj Boyd was talked about as like a first round pick, almost completely based off of that one game. Marcus Hunt did the same thing. Like Marcus Hunt made an entire he was picked in the second round and like literally only played in bowl games. Like he would just show up for bowl games, slump it the rest of the season, and then the Bengals took him in the second round. It really seems like that affects it more than someone being like, I've seen the Geno Smith thing, but I see people more overrating guys because of the bowl game, entering the next season as a prospect than through the draft process.
And Mario Edwards, who we mentioned earlier, was a guy who went up against Greg Robinson, number 2 pick in the draft last year, and had a great game, and kind of that had that effect.
To go back to your Geno Smith point, I kind of was going to bring this up, and you did it, and I didn't even have to ask you, so I appreciate that. When you look at that game, and then Geno Smith gets drafted to play in the state where he couldn't throw the ball because it was cold. I mean, does that seems like that would be something that would be like a red flag? You struggle to throw the ball when it was cold, snowy. I understand the wind was, horrible that day, but that happens 2 to 3 times a year in games when you play in New York or when you play in the AFC East in general. I mean, you have Buffalo and you have New England in your division, so you're talking probably 6 games a year where you have that opportunity. So in that aspect, how does that not weigh a little bit more, or does it in your mind, Justice, in an instance like that where a guy clearly struggles in those elements? Why would a team that probably plays, a fourth of their games in those type of elements, why would they think that would be a good fit?
I don't know. I don't know how much I'd really put that much value into it. I mean, you'd like to see a guy, play at least one cold game, right? And you're not. It's different in the NFL when you're there's basically a college season and then there's like a winter season on top of that. But people say the same thing about Manning at the pro level, right? They're like Manning struggles in the cold and all sorts of stuff. Teddy got a couple knocks from it when he was playing in the cold. I'm not sure how much that actually matters that much. Like, I'm not opposed to saying that it has value, but I don't know of it off the top of my head. I mean, I'm not sure how much that truly matters. I'm more worried. I'd be more worried about seeing a guy struggle against good competition the time he sees one good competition, on a schedule, than seeing a guy struggle in the cold against a random team.
Any other prospects you want to hit in the conference championship games, guys?
No, I think we covered. I think we covered most of them. One other guy that just kind of mildly interests me is Blake Sims, and that quarterback for Alabama, and that's just because I just don't really know what to do with him at the pro level. Is he going to be a player who gets moved to a different position? I don't really see him as a quarterback. I don't think he's going to clear 6 feet tall. But I did like the way he responded after almost getting benched last week. So it's just a guy to watch this week, and I think Alabama's going to win that game.
Yeah, he's going to be like 5'10" apparently. He's going to be like 5'10" flat. There's no way he's going to cross over that 6 foot thing. I like him at quarterback. I mean, I think he deserves a shot there, if nothing else during an All-Star game. But I can also see the value in him playing running back. I mean, the way he's able to flip his body and move from direction to direction is something that I really haven't seen outside of. I mean, he's a notch below Vic and Johnny, but I wouldn't say that I've ever seen a guy who's better than him between Vic and Johnny. I mean, I think he's slightly better than Russell Wilson at his ability to just like flip his shoulders and decide, okay, I'm going this opposite direction, and I'm just going to shake this edge rusher. I really like that trait about him, and I can see how that translates to running back. where he was playing. I believe someone tweeted out something where they were interviewing an Alabama player, and they were saying, he was everywhere. I mean, he was playing cornerback, he was playing running back, he was playing special teams. His first year there at Bama on the scout team. I think he'll find a place in the NFL. I think he's going to get drafted somewhere. He's too good of an athlete. I'd give him a shot at quarterback before, moving him on. But, I said that about some guys like Zach Martin at tackle too, right? I would say, all right, play him at tackle, and then if something happens, move him into guard, and he'll be a really good guard. Well, now they just put him at guard, and he's a really good guard. If Blake Sims is going to be a good running back, just play him at running back, I guess.
When you look at, and this is to a Twitter question, so I'll bring him back up. When you look at Eddie Goldman, we had a question from at DNA Dez, I guess, about Eddie Goldman. What are your thoughts on Goldman, Justin? And do you have a comp for him yet, or what are just your general thoughts on him?
Yeah, Goldman was a player that I only broke down the one game because there's really not draft breakdown clips on him yet because he's a junior, and I guess just now kind of catching on. But he was impressive to me in some ways. He's a space-eating guy. He's going to attract double teams. He definitely looks strong enough to cause some problems. One of the first snaps that I remember seeing of him against Notre Dame's offensive line was he was getting double teamed, and he took the blockers on with one hand each, and he had his arms extended. So it was kind of a funny-looking thing, and he was successful with it. He looks strong. He's got good leverage on most of the plays, but he didn't look all that quick. And so is he going to be a sack? He's not going to be a sack master. He's not going to be one of these interior pressure players that I think NFL teams look for high in the draft. So that's why I think when I hear somebody say he's in the top 5, that's kind of surprising to me. You look at his production, 4 sacks this year, but I can remember one of the sacks in the Notre Dame game, and I don't remember how. I think he just had one in that game, but it was kind of where Golson just ran up into the pocket and ran into him. So it wasn't not to say that he didn't get any pressure in that game, because he did, but it's not that kind of immediate pressure that's going to wreak havoc on a quarterback. So I look at him more as a space plugger, run stuffing guy. He had to be spelled. He didn't, he's not going to play 90% of your snaps, at least not till he gets into NFL condition. So I can't put him in the top 5 or top 10. I can see why people want to put him in the first round though, because he's a good lineman. He's a good big body to put in there.
Justice, have you watched enough of him to have an opinion?
Yeah, I think he's a stout run guy. Like Justin said, he's not getting that initial pressure, which I think is more important than, cleaning up sacks. I mean, we saw all these good, we saw Kelsey Corliss, basically make a college career off cleaning up Jadeveon Clowney's sacks, right? Like, that just kind of sometimes happens. I think, that happens a little bit with Danny Shelton at University of Washington. His sacks are sacks, in the stat book, but, he's not blowing anyone up off the line of scrimmage. The guy that I've heard him being compared to is actually Brandy Starks, which I find kind of interesting. Because
I was going to say the same thing.
So. He's kind of a stout run guy, but he's not super big. Goldman could probably play like 1, but I'm not sure he could play nose tackle. Teams might want to make him a nose tackle because there's really not those bodies available in this draft. High, except for maybe Danny Shelton, but even then, I think that's probably like a 3rd-round pick. I don't see that much difference between him and like Justin Ellis last year. And Justin Ellis is starting right now for the Raiders, but he was a 3rd-round selection, so it's hard for me to do the math on Danny Shelton currently. But yeah, Goldman, like I said, I think he's clearly the 2nd-best defensive lineman, pure defensive lineman in this class, unless you want to count Sean Oakman because you think he can play 34 defensive end. But he'll probably go top 10, partially because of the need at that position specifically. But I don't see him as a top 5 talent. No, I mean, I definitely think there's a tier above him.
The other player we got a question on, and this was from NFL Draft Bites, Eric Stryker. Do you have any thoughts on him, Justice?
Who was someone made like the Ernie Sims comparison, and I wasn't completely opposed to that. And that's pretty much where I ride with him. Me and Dane had a long conversation about him a while back, just because we were like, where the hell does he play? Because he's just so small that it's almost impossible to consider him as an edge player. Um, but I mean, he's almost like he's like the Telvin Smith of edge rushers, right? He's just like this crazy athlete, but he's just way, way, way too small. Like people will talk about Shane Ray being undersized at like 250. What's Stryker at? I mean, Stryker's at like 230.
He's at like 220.
Yeah, he is small. He is a safety. He is, he's tiny. I can ride with the Ernie Sims comparison. He's probably not going to be one of my guys. You know, I'm just worried about how he's going to handle NFL tackles compared, because the jump from the tackle play or the offensive line play in general in college football compared to the NFL might be the biggest difference, because the offensive line is about the unit. It's not about the individual. And if you're able to target just one guy over and over and over again, like Vic Beasley did against Cam Irving, you could just pound that home. In the NFL, I mean, those guys are too good. They're too talented. They're too well coached to have that happen. So I'm just kind of worried about that small body. I mean, he might get bench pressed by some of these offensive linemen at the next level.
Can he be successful in maybe a Tampa 2 style where he's playing that off-ball weak side backer, or is that still not something you would even think about?
I mean, I would consider it, but I really look at him more as a backer than as a pass rusher. Even in the 3-4, I mean, I'd be super worried about him. And I was a guy who liked guys like Bruce Irvin, who were super undersized. He really looks like a defensive back playing defensive end, which is not a good look. Not a good look.
Justin, have you watched him at all?
Yeah, he looks like your guy Buchanan. He looks like an in-the-box safety.
Yep.
You know, he's I don't know if he's even 6 feet tall. He's maybe 220. If he bulks up to 225, can he even keep that on? Is that just like Thanksgiving weight if he gets up to that weight? So I don't know, man. I haven't given him too much thought because he's a junior and because I don't know what to do with him. So I'm just going to be honest with you guys and say I just hope he goes back to school because I don't really want to have to figure him out this year.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I've looked at him a little bit. I think maybe you can Darrell Washington him, where you kind of you get him in a scheme where you just let him run sideline to sideline and make plays, like you said, like Deion Buchanan's doing this year. I think that's his best fit, probably, but it's going to be, like you said, that's a different type of thing. I mean, we're seeing kind of the Ryan Shazier struggles this year with, being nicked up, not being able to, you're not able to win in the box with your size and quickness, or with your speed and quickness, excuse me, like you could in college, and Justice kind of hit on that, because not only are the offensive line units better, but those offensive linemen are athletic in the NFL. I mean, they're athletes. They're not, just big bodies that some of these colleges, especially, I mean, you're talking about Rice and Texas Tech even, who they played Louisiana Tech this year, I think. So, I mean, you kind of look at who he's had to go up against, and how many of those guards or, even their tackle, I mean, how many offensive linemen are getting drafted from those teams? None? Maybe one? So it's a different, it's a different animal. It'll be interesting. I'm not opposed to him, coming out, because it's his decision, whatever. But I do always worry about those undersized guys, especially when they're that severely undersized. To finish up, hot takes. I know Justin has a couple. Justice, do you have one or two tonight?
Yeah, just before we move on, the other guy that people compare him to is another dude out in Pittsburgh. Sean Spence. Besides our boy, the other boy from Ohio State, Sean Spence. I mean, he's another undersized guy. Was picked in the 3rd round. Really hasn't done anything. It was, he's been hurt his entire career. I think he's just starting to work back onto the field. I think he got a couple starting games because of injury. But I mean, he was AWOL for 2 years because of injuries.
Yeah, and I mean that's the thing is for every Darrell Washington or Dayon Buchanan that you have that's successful, you have multiple guys like you said that just are not, and so it's one of those things. You have to watch it, kind of follow along with it, and pick the right guys. So Justin, what was the first hot take you had this week?
I'm going to start with the hot take from our buddy Pete Smith at withthefirstpick.com. And, Pete's a good guy and really thorough analyst. And his hot take this week was that he would move Ty Montgomery, the Stanford receiver / kick returner / running back, to the defensive side of the ball as a safety. Now, this on the surface, this does seem like a scorching hot take, but I got to tell you, watching Montgomery this year, you don't really know what to do with him. The way he catches the ball isn't very natural. He is a very good kick returner. I don't know if he can tackle, but this might not be as hot as it seems. I don't think it's going to happen, though, so I had to put it in the hot take category. But, I got to take my hat off to Pete for getting creative there.
Well, Montgomery's issue is that he only runs fast when he has the ball in his hand. If he's playing safety, he's going to look like a snail out there.
Yeah, that could be a problem. So, and I don't know if you want to teach a player to play safety, when he gets to the NFL. I think that's something you want to take care of beforehand. But to be fair, he catches the ball like a defensive back sometimes.
That is true. Justice, what about you?
Our good dude, Ben Natan, he released his, he released his big board onto Twitter, the 29th, so that would have been Saturday. And he had Cedric Kabuhi behind Lyle Collins, Ronnie Stanley, Ty Sambrilo, Brandon Scherf, TJ Clemens, Jake Fisher, Spencer Drango, Darrell Williams, Andres Pete, and Tyrus Thomas in his 3rd tier of offensive tackles. I'm not a Cedric Kabuhi guy, but you guys might make me a Cedric Kabuhi guy if we keep dropping him. I think he's going to be a late 1st-round pick. I don't think he's going to be like the 10th offensive tackle off the board. He's still an athlete. Teams are still going to take a shot at him for being a dancing bear, if nothing else. He's proven himself at right tackle, struggles at left tackle a little bit. He shouldn't have been ranked that low.
I question Ben, and this can be one of my ones. I question Ben, and you're an Oregon guy, and I don't think you agree with this. Efo as second corner.
No, he's crazy. Efo's not a cornerback. Efo's a slot corner if he's a corner, and he gets abused in the red zone. He's a good corner, between the 20s. He's a willing tackler, but goddamn, when you put him in the red zone, he just looks like a fool. He has closing speed. Just play him at free safety already. Please. Move all the corners to free safety.
That's right. Hey, so we're moving. So instead of moving tackles to guards this year, we're going to move corners to free safety.
Except for Holloman, because for some reason I want Holloman at corner instead of safety, because he can't tackle. Yeah, it's just move every safety to corner, move every corner to safety. We'll be good.
And then we'll move Ty Montgomery to safety so that we have somebody back there.
That's right. Justin, do you have any more tonight?
Just my last hot take is Bucky Brooks, and he's always good for some, but Bucky is a former scout, and he does the work, he knows the lingo, but he's still hanging on to Jameis Winston as the best quarterback prospect in college football, and really he's probably not alone there, and that's probably not a super hot take, but Winston has thrown 12 picks in his last 6 games. So it's just, I think it was Dane Brugler tweeted this out earlier, but Winston's approaching that level of interceptions for his career that's just unheard of for a first-round quarterback. And I know that the last quarterback that was taken in the first round that had this many picks, I think Winston's up to 16 or 17 this year. Last quarterback that was taken in the first round with that many picks was Matt Ryan. So this is kind of the territory that Winston's put himself into with his just disregard for ball security, especially in the first half of these games.
We could have an entire hot take segment on Jameis Winston and Matt Ryan. That would be.
For what it's worth, I think Adam Schefter was on the Levitard show either last week or the week before, and he said he still believes Jameis Winston is going to go number one. Wow. So I don't know what to do with that. I don't agree with it. I mean, some people might say, the biggest issue with the system isn't that he's throwing, guys are throwing into open space. Speaking about Mariota, it's the mentality of, okay, this guy is open. Sometimes, I mean, there's been a bunch of pieces about RG3 the past couple weeks, right? With his benching, with all that, by really smart people, and what they've said is, he'll look at a guy and his guy will be NFL open, and he'll just move on to the next read. But the issue is that's as open as a guy's going to get at this level, and mentally they're just like, okay, that's not what I'm used to. I'm going to go to this guy. So I could see that being a knock for Mariota. I could see it being a knock with poor timing because of what's happened with RG3 in Washington and how much that team is invested in a young player and how much they've lost because of it. But man, I mean, Jameis Winston just makes terrible decisions in underneath coverage. And sometimes he'll just lob it. I mean, nothing's going to be worse than, I believe it was the Louisville game, when he had a running back doing jumping jacks and was open, and he decided to throw it down the sideline into double coverage and got a pick. I mean, if he would have dumped it to his guy could have gotten 30 yards after the catch. Jameis was crazy.
Jameis really kind of catapulted Gerard Holloman into the first-round discussion with that game. I mean, Holloman had 2 picks, had a third that he dropped, and then it was the next week I think he had 3 picks and dropped a 4th. So really, Jameis just started that ball rolling. Even though Holloman already had like 6 or 7 picks up to that point, that really put him on the map.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed, just because every once in a while I'll just go on ESPN and just look at the statistics and see, okay, Holy Kikaha's leading the NCAA in sacks now. Just to see stuff like that. I saw him at the top of the interceptions list, but one, it's really hard to judge cornerbacks or judge defensive backs on statistics, so I didn't think much of it. Sometimes you'll see a MAC player, lead the NCAA in sacks. He's like a defensive tackle in the MAC, and you won't think that much of it. It wasn't until that game and then seeing him on all like the Bednarik watch lists and things like that, I was like, okay, he's the only sophomore on this finalist list for defensive player of the year, and he's leading the NCAA in interceptions. This guy obviously must be talented. I need to watch him. And then the Florida State game happened. I was like, okay, this is definitely a guy I need to watch. Ended up writing about him on Football Savages like the week later or something.
Do you have any more hot takes tonight, Justice?
You know what? I have the hottest of hot takes, but it's not something that was public. A guy in the league told me. So when you think of highly drafted kickers, the 2 guys that you think of are Sebastian Janikowski and Mike Nugent, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the only 2 guys I can think of.
Yeah. I was told that Roberto Aguayo from Florida State, he's going to be the highest drafted kicker whenever he declares since Mike Nugent.
Wow.
I talked to a guy in the league, and he said he wouldn't be surprised if he went in like the late 2nd round. Which is saying something.
So he's not as good as Janikowski is what you're telling me.
Or Nugent.
He's not as good as Seabass. Seabass's Wikipedia is the greatest thing in the entire world. If you have like 2 minutes of your day, go to Sebastian Janikowski. Stop listening to this podcast. Stop doing anything draft related. Forget all about us. Go straight to Sebastian Janikowski's Wikipedia page and read about all the stuff he got in trouble for right before or at, like the month after he was drafted, and all of the time he did when he declared early as a kicker from Florida State. It's amazing. He was arrested like 3 times. Like, it was the most Raiders thing in the entire world to get like this felon kicker in the first round.
And Janikowski was drugging himself with GHB, which is just unbelievable.
Man, there needs to be a 30 for 30 about him. And like someone was telling me, because I questioned, I was young at the time. I mean, I didn't know about Sebastian Janikowski. Someone was like, yeah, he had to get like a working visa or something, or he would be out of the country. I was like, what? And then, Bobby Bowden has quotes about how they would have won national championships like 3 years in a row if he would have stayed there, which is crazy. Just all sorts of stuff, man. There needs to be a Sebastian Janikowski 30 for 30. Just put it back to back with a Randy Moss one. That's all I need.
All right, guys. Anything else tonight as we head out of here?
No, I think that's it. I don't think Rashad Green's the 13th best player in college football. I'd like to say that in public.
Is Dak Prescott even draftable as a quarterback?
I don't think he's going to make us decide that this year. Hopefully.
I hope not. Yeah.
I wanted to say one thing before we get out of here tonight. I know he's a guy he was the subject of some summer of 2013 hot takes. Devin Gardner, Michigan quarterback, played his last collegiate game last week, and for all the things and all the struggles he's had as a player, and he'll probably get a look at a different position other than quarterback. The class that he showed in that game against Ohio State last weekend after J.T. Barrett broke his leg, Devin Gardner, say what you will about him as a prospect, but total class act on and off the field from everything I know. So hats off to that guy. I hope I wish him the best. I hope he gets some kind of All-Star game invite so they can find a spot for him to try out for the NFL.
Yeah, I'd like to give a shout out to Oregon State for their strong sportsmanship for not running off the field after getting beat down by Oregon. It's nice to see your little brothers out there, just still putting up a fight. It's great to beat you guys every single year. Can't wait to do it next year with Braxton Miller.
Are we going to get a Oregon-Ohio State national championship game next year? I'm hoping so.
That would be great. I'd just love to see JT against Braxton.
Man, you're so pessimistic. I love it.
My teams are. I already know. My teams are going to lose in the game before the championship game. Green Bay's losing in the NFC Championship. Oregon's losing in the first week of the playoffs. So this is just what happens to me.
So what you're saying is they will beat Arizona this week.
Ooh, I'm hoping. I'm praying that Scooby Wright's gonna have me have nightmares. Like, he's got to declare a year early. Like, just don't play football next season. Like, I can't watch football if Scooby Wright's gonna be playing if he beats Oregon back to back.
I just want Arizona to win for the hot takes, man. I'm sorry.
Oh man, the Mariota hot takes will be so good. Yeah. Oh my God, I can't wait. That's why I want Winston and Mariota, and I want that to be the one game Mariota actually shows up. I'll be fine. I'll be fine with losing. I'll be fine with losing that Florida State game if Winston gives us a good conversation point that I could just mess with everyone with, man. I just root for Twitter to blow up. That's really why I'm here.
Exactly. All right, guys, I appreciate it. We'll do it again next week, and we'll have a look at what some of the prospects did in those championship games and what we saw. So have a good night, everybody.
Take care.